Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Leadership podcast, the Culture Edit Reloaded. I'm Sandra Patel, founder and CEO of Transition Partners. This season, I'm flying solo as I sit down with international leaders to discuss their leadership journeys and how they have embedded a thriving and positive culture. Hello and welcome to our Let's Talk Leadership podcast. My name is Sandra Patel and I'm delighted to be back recording here today in the Transition Partners headquarters. Currently we have, and I'm welcomed here today by Rachel Swann, who is the CEO at UMA. Hi Rachel, how are you?
Hi Sandra, very well thanks. How are you? You okay?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I just thought then I meant to ask you before, have I pronounced the company name correctly?
No, it's Uma, a bit like Thurman. So yeah, but it's fine, don't worry.
I thought, is it Uma or UMA? Right.
No,
okay.
Uma's absolutely fine, don't worry.
Do not make that mistake again.
It's fine.
Fantastic. Lovely to have you here today. I'm really looking forward to finding out more about your journey. And, we've spoken previously and I was really impressed. But I was really looking forward to finding out a little bit more detail and just sharing it all with the community and our listeners and viewers. So it'd be great if initially we could just start with, a really quick kind of whistle-stop tour of your background and kind of how you got to where you are today, because what I find really fascinating as well is that you didn't start out in tech and you had a long career outside of tech. So I think it'd be really good if we could touch on that as well.
Yeah, how long you got? Because I am getting on a bit. So yeah, so I've been in UMA since June last year, but I'm for 52. I think I said to you, for 52 years I've been told I'm the wrong age and gender, and all of a sudden I kind of tick the boxes. So I am that grey-haired old woman in tech. I've only been in tech 20 years, but I grew up in South Wales and did a language degree and graduated into recession. And there'd always been an assumption that I would go into teaching, not by my parents. It wasn't that at all. It was kind of by the institutions. And because there was no kind of constructive career advice at the time, because it was assumed I'd go into teaching, I metaphorically stuck the fingers up at them and ended up doing a postgrad diploma, which was a master's by any other name, in export sales and marketing. So essentially it took language degrees and converted into something useful. And, as you do, and we're talking about, that was in 93. So I spoke a range of European languages and went into British manufacturing. So for 10 years, I was literally export sales and marketing of British manufactured product, whether that was printing rollers, packaging, steel, lingerie. So I was export sales manager for Rigby and Pella, the manufacturers of that. They're the bra makers to the Queen. Steel, range of different things. And the key thing there really is that it was always selling a solution, because if you're selling a British manufactured product, so factory manufactured as well, you're never ever going to compete on price. It's always got to be value and solution selling, consultative selling. And in the early 2000s, I was employee kind of number 1/2 in a startup that had been set up by three guys, which was using packaging to drive consumers offline to online, which I know now sounds completely bizarre. Can you imagine people not being online? But we were working with FMCG and we were running on-pack loyalty schemes, on-pack promotions, and we were doing everything from putting the unique proof of purchase on that packaging all the way through then to driving and managing these big online communities. So we were Andrex Puppy Points, we were McVitie's VIP Rewards, Anchor Rewards Club, all this kind of thing. And that business, that was kind of where I really realised that these skills were completely transferable. So, okay, I wasn't necessarily using my languages all the time, but it was still about that end user. So it's always about that end user, what's in it for them, that selling of a solution, that kind of commercial mutual benefit, which was kind of the real key. I will say you'll only ever make somebody buy something once. They won't ever buy it off you again if you make them do it. But if you're giving them a solution, there's that mutual benefit, which is a phrase I overuse. But it was the same in export sales versus kind of online, moving people offline to online. And that's where I really got into tech, and particularly that B2B2C focus. So in that business, Hive Online, in the end, I was there for about 11 or 12 years, and that business was affected by the Brexit vote. We'll move on. Ended up then in a couple of other, again, consumer engagement SaaS platforms. And in January 22, essentially made myself redundant from an e-commerce online personalization business, which had been a real SaaS, true SaaS, whereas the other businesses had been much more around a managed service. So you got a proposition, again, always focusing on the B2B to C, so you get it right for the end user. And I met quite a few people in the process of this e-commerce personalization tool, and that was essentially because the board had kind of decided they were quite happy for it to kind of survive and thrive rather than really grow. It was a bit of a kind of lifestyle business in the end. And I joined UMA in June 22, having been introduced to the business by our current investors. And the bit that really, really appealed to me was about this tech. It's a B2B proposition, but if you don't get it right for the end user, and in our case the end user is an employee, you're not going to get the really valuable part, which is actually the insight and the data for employers and managers.
Yeah.
Because essentially UMA is employee smart workspace management. It's around allowing employees to manage their own workspace from desk booking, room booking, this kind of thing. This isn't a pitch. But the so what is then you've got smart data, actual factually correct, accurate data that employers can then make use of for financially informed decisions. And that for me was the bit that I loved. So it was still adding value, solution, mutual benefit. Great SaaS product that has been, I always say we're small but perfectly formed. I'm not, but the business is. We're based in Halifax, West Yorkshire, not Halifax, Nova Scotia. You know, we are working with global partners. And you know what? Part of what I was doing, age 23, having graduated with languages, was thinking about that end user and that added value. And that's still what I'm doing 30 years on. 30 years, oh my goodness, 30 years on. So it was a fairly circuitous route, all because I didn't want to go into teaching because nobody had said, Rach, do you fancy teaching? So there you go.
Oh, fantastic. That's amazing. And that's... you did very well there to give us a quick whistle stop.
It's as quick as it gets.
Kind of like speeding up a little bit as you got close to the end. Amazing. I mean, that's really, really impressive. And I should imagine particularly from the industry that you started out in, you know, sales exports, you know, for so many years as well, that you probably came up against a number of hurdles or obstacles, challenges to kind of progress and develop your career and move up the career ladder. So it'd be interesting, obviously, you know, given your age, your gender, be really interesting to talk about what hurdles you did come up against and how you managed those, how you overcame those, and you know, any kind of advice around that for other you know, aspirational female leaders as well.
Yeah, really interesting. I mean, with hindsight, I came up a whole load of obstacles. And if I was told once when I was leaving a job, I was told on numerous occasions that we've not actually paid you market rate. All right, well, why are you telling me that now? I think one of the things really was around expectation. But I always push myself, because this sounds incredibly trite, push myself because I wanted to do the best job I could do. And it's probably only with hindsight a lot of the time I realised there were obstacles. I think as women of my generation, you're kind of several generations younger than I am, I think we had to do it, and we just kind of got on with it. And there have been some great people on the way who've helped, some men and women, you know, have really helped. I think one of the things that I didn't have very early on actually was a mentor. I think had I had a mentor or somebody who could have gone, what are you doing? That open questioning, that could have shaped things quite differently. I mean, I'm a firm believer you can't change what's happened. It's history. What you can do, what you're in control of, is how you react and respond to things going forwards. I think for me, though, the best kind of advice that I take, or I ended up having very little confidence in terms of any of my transferable skills. And that was partly because I didn't reach out for help, but also because I wasn't necessarily getting it. But very firmly, I wasn't reaching out for help because I've got twin boys who are now 18, and my husband's a lot older than I am. I am the breadwinner and have been the whole time. I think having that ability to take a step back and look at something constructively and not come up with an immediate solution, but really look at it, trying to remove emotion, is something that in many respects I should have done much earlier. The so what's, you know, and I'm a big advocate of now saying, well, so what does that mean? What's in it for me? What's in it for them? You know, and that's both in a sales point of view, but also a personal point of view. I think the thing, though, the main thing is that in terms of advice, it's it's never stop asking. You know, it was when I stopped asking people, because I felt I had to prove myself. When I kind of didn't ask, that's when I didn't get. And people made assumptions, and their assumptions and perceptions were very different to my self-perception. And, you know, and it was only when I started asking, and partly that was potentially due to lack of appraisal, this kind of thing, self-appraisal and constructive, you know, formulated appraisals in the workplace. I think that's the type of thing that I've taken out and really try and use going forwards. You know, I have regular one-to-ones with all of my team, whether direct reports, it's always ideally weekly, maybe fortnightly, and then indirect reports, I try and have them monthly. Now, as I said, we're small but perfectly formed. That's relatively easy to do.
Yeah.
But it's having that opportunity for people to say, you know, I say to people, how do you think you're doing? And they'll say, how do you think I'm doing? That kind of thing. So about that constructive piece. But there's kind of three values really that I came to relatively, probably about 15 years ago, so probably halfway through my career to date, when I was looking to recruit some people for a business I was in at the time. Mm-hmm. And I thought, what are the key traits? And what are the traits that have served me well in the bits where I've really enjoyed and have really performed? And what are the traits and characteristics that I've seen in people that have been successful, you know, in terms of their own career progression? Mm-hmm. And there's three, and they all begin with C. And one of them is curiosity, and one of them is courage, and one of them is coachability. And so the curiosity is never stop asking questions. Yeah, but there's a difference between an open question and a closed question. So the how, why, what, where, when, really, that kind of thing, the open questions. There's no such thing, in my view, or rarely such a thing, as a stupid open question. Yeah, and it's all about removing assumption. And if you ask, and you have an adult style of asking it, then what's the worst that can happen? The courage is then having that bravery to be able to say, I don't know, what can I do? Keep asking those questions. Mm-hmm. And also to adjust the bits and go, yeah, you know what, I really don't know. That's both from a sales point of view, but also from a personal development point of view. I don't know where I'm going to be. I'm 52, coming at 53. Where am I going to be in 5 years' time? Who knows? Does it scare me? It could do. But the bits that are in my control are, again, asking those questions. And then the coachability goes back to the curiosity. I need to be coachable. I want to learn. I want somebody to kind of go, right, Rach, what do you think? What's the next step? What are you going to do? How are we going to do it? But equally, we need to be able to coach our customers and our colleagues. So it's about saying, you know, asking them those open questions. And I found that it doesn't matter what your background. If you've got those three things, then pretty much, I say to my boys, the world's your lobster, and they roll their eyes and go, Mum, it's oyster. And I go, yeah, I know, but at least you're listening. And I think, frankly, it doesn't matter what your background is. If you've got, ideally, all three of those traits, and I do find they're interlinked, then that willingness to learn means that actually if you're going into tech or you're going into, I mean, clearly there are certain industries and sectors where you have to have specialist training or education. But if you're going, for example, into tech, it doesn't matter to a certain extent the branch of tech, but particularly in a commercial role or in a business management role, unless you're looking for that programmer, as long as you've got those core skills, the industry knowledge can be learned. And that's what I've learned along the way. It doesn't matter if it's bras, steel, or tech, consumer promotions. If you've got those traits, and actually the rest can be learned as long as you are also reminding yourself of it. Again, another long-winded answer. Sorry.
No, I absolutely agree, and I'm with you on that. If you don't ask, you don't get, and you know, it is having that, being curious enough, and having the courage to be able to do that, rather than just kind of cracking on thinking that you're doing the right thing, or you're doing an okay job and not actually knowing. You
sound like you're speaking from experience there.
Yeah, I've you know, and I think you referred to kind of our generations and things, but you know, when I started, I've always been in the same career, in the same industry, recruitment within tech. I've been doing it for 22 years now, and it was the same for me really for the good first probably 10 years. You know, we didn't have things like PDPs and regular review meetings and things like that, and it was, you know, the management and leadership styles were very, very different to what they are now. And you know, obviously there are still kind of those old school techniques used in some places, but I think the world's very much moved on now, and and it was kind of pretty much just crack on, get on with it. But yeah, I was just always thought, you know what, I was eager to learn. I wanted to progress as quickly as I could, and I thought, well, the only way to do that is ask, and if I don't get the right answers, then I have to try and find out some other way. It's,
Exactly. And what's the worst that will happen? I mean, I remember.
I always say,
Yeah.
what is the worst, if you ask, what is the worst thing that's going to happen to
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, exactly. And it's about having removing the emotions sometimes and looking at it that way. What's the worst that could happen? I mean, I remember in one business that, there was constant pressure to bring the sales in. I remember somebody saying, if you don't bring those sales in, then essentially people won't be able to pay their mortgage. And that's the worst that could happen. But I was looking at, when I was writing, we went through a restructuring process, and I had to write references for people who had been made redundant. And when I was looking at the references I was writing for them, all of which were glowing, it hadn't been my decision. Looking at the references, thinking they've gone on to amazing jobs, and look at the experience and they've gone through this awful period and come out the other side really well. That was the worst that could happen. And frankly, they all were brilliant afterwards. And it was like, right, okay, we've been through some rough times, and you know what, we're all still here. So that's the worst that could happen. And actually, the best might happen.
I know, and that's how I think about the current climate at the minute as well. If I'm honest, I've been through 2 recessions and COVID. So I'm just like, well, what's the worst that can happen? This one, absolutely. It's a mindset thing as well, isn't it? So, on that note, actually, how would you describe I think you probably touched on this a little bit, so it might be useful to talk a bit more about the current setup at UMA around leadership style, how you kind of lead others, and how a little bit about the business and the culture and environment there, really, I think would be nice.
Yeah, well, I'm very fortunate. So I didn't create the business. I didn't found the business. I've got a great guy called Steve Milner who founded the business. And it's we've got a couple of values, and I'm not in the office today because otherwise, if I were, you'd see one of our values over my right shoulder, which says "Don't be a dick," which is But Steve founded the business, and one of the values is we work hard. We can work from anywhere, but we work hard, and it's about accountability. So it's everybody is accountable for their own actions, but again, it's having that responsibility, which is, okay, if something has gone wrong, we can't change that. What's in our control is how we address that going forwards. So that's very much, and that's from Steve through down to our marketing assistant. I joined the business June last year, and a conversation, I was introduced to Steve by our investors. And once our investor left the room, I actually said to Steve, I'm not really sure why I'm here. And he said, well, I hate being CEO. I said, God, I loved it at the previous job. And he said, that's why you're here. And that, I think, is absolutely symptomatic of the entire culture in the business, which is learn or understand and identify what you're good at, and what you're not good at, hold your hands up. And that comes down to then thinking about trying to remove ego, and thinking, hence the don't be a dick, but thinking about, what's in it for the other person. So our big thing is about growth. We are doing incredibly well. We've got some major wins. We are, Cisco absolutely love us. A few months ago, or 6 weeks ago, we won Cisco Fast Future Innovations Awards. We were one of the top 3 in their first iteration in the UK, Cisco Global. We've got some other awards, which unfortunately I can't talk about yet, but you'll hear about it next week. And we've just won a massive contract with a huge public service organisation outside of the UK. I mean, we've got some great stuff happening. And that's because everybody knows their roles and responsibilities. We try and help each other out, but equally there's a difference between accountability and responsibility. So it's living, which sounds a bit trite, but it's essentially, if you are accountable for example, a part in the sales process or the finances, or ultimately as CEO accountable for the performance, I can't do it all, and it's understanding and recognizing I can't do it all. Steve is brilliant at the whole product and the strategy of the product and where we're going. And what we do on a really regular basis is I say, why are we doing that, Steve? Our route to market is X, Y, Z. Why are we doing that? what's the benefit in doing it that way, and as opposed to doing it this way. And as a result, we've discovered a couple of additional routes to go-to-market routes we want to explore. We've also very dramatically shifted the positioning of the product, of the business. So 12 months ago, it was a business selling kit that had some software on it, However, actually, it's the software, it's the SaaS that's amazing IP, and it's really delivering the benefits. The hardware is an enabler, but not all our customers take the hardware because they're interested in the SaaS. So it's allowed us to really think about things. And that culture is about that constant curiosity, that learning. You work hard, but you work hard in order for us all to get to a common goal, common objective. So it's about, it's not leading from the front, it's not leading from the middle. It's all about us all having accountability and having an adult attitude towards it, which is, look, we never say it's not my fault. If we've done something, own up to it. Don't be a dick. But we can't change that. What do we do going forwards? How do we address that? What are the processes? Look, we're a scaling startup. So, some of the things are really innovative. Some of the things you're a bit like, oh my goodness. So, around some of our policies, they need updating, frankly. I mean, we're legal, we're all fine, but they don't necessarily reflect the business of where we're at the minute. So I'm accountable for making sure they're updated, but I'm certainly probably not going to be responsible for writing them, because I know plenty of people who are better at that than I am. So it's then incumbent on me, though, to make sure they happen. So yeah, it's and having those adult conversations, which is, look, is this working with you? Is this working for you? Why not? Or something's not quite right here. Or actually, that was really good. And we've had one situation where we've got our amazing office manager and an ops manager, and she does customer success as well, Abby. Her confidence was not very high, and she's phenomenal. And she's her own worst critic. So challenging her constructively on that in terms of, Abby, you've just said that. Tell me why you've just said that. And do you think this output justifies what you've just said or has come from this? Because actually this output, I think, is amazing. What do other people think? And she's gone, all right. And she's completely transformed. And as a result, our internal processes have transformed as well. The whole team is amazing. And there's a couple of others who've done similarly. But it's about having those, naming names, Dan and Dean in particular, in our tech team, have again kind of gone, actually, we've not necessarily worked in SaaS before, but we know tech. Oh, okay, right, we can see that. So it's having that courage to go, I know what I know, but I know what I don't know. And therefore I'm going to ask. It all kind of interlinks.
Yeah, fantastic. So some great core values there. Absolutely love it. How do you handle, and I think this has become such a big thing, and you'll have seen, I've seen a shift. Obviously you've been in the industry longer than I have, so I'm sure you've seen an even bigger shift. And apologies, I did not mean to highlight an age difference there.
It's fine. I started off by saying it, so don't worry, Sandra, it's fine.
But work-life balance, how do you, because obviously you've talked about work hard, and you're a startup, and this early kind of infancy stage, everyone has to roll the sleeves up, get the hands dirty, and it's a tough one to manage, isn't it? It's really tough to find that middle ground. So how do you think that should be seen across the board, and how does that correlate to what you guys do?
Well, so we are we existed before COVID came along. We'd got the idea, and hybrid working existed before COVID came along. All COVID did. One of the side effects and outputs of COVID was it expedited hybrid working. Now, frankly, I know of so few organisations that don't have hybrid policies if they can avoid it. And with a number of qualified employees, or resource being scarce, people have to implement hybrid working. So that helps. I think in terms of the work-life balance, I have a real bugbear around work-life balance. Right? I think if you're going to have this as a phrase, worst case it should be life-work balance. But actually, I think it's life balance. And I think it's life balance because work is an intrinsic part of the vast majority of people's life, right? So life balance. So it's how do you, and with hybrid working and with the always on, always connected world, that life balance essentially means that work has a part to play, But as you said, because we're scaling, we're a startup and we're scaling, then it might be that I actually have a thought at 4 a.m, because, you know, that's what time I wake up and going to go, oh, that doesn't mean I expect everybody else to be working at 4 a.m. I might just be sending myself an email or something like that. But equally, if we've got, the vast majority of our team are parents. I think there's only 2 that aren't parents. And so actually, as long as the job is done, as long as there are clearly identified tasks and milestones and achievements that have been mutually agreed rather than imposed, right? As long as they're being done, then actually it's fine if you need to do the school run, or you need to go and see the nativity, or if you don't have children, if you've got other things you want to be doing. We've just introduced, we are small, we're starting. So pay rises, cash flow is one of the biggest bugbears of any startup. Pay rises are challenging. What we have just introduced, though, is actually an extra day's leave for everybody to be spent volunteering. So, and the only request we've said is that can you just confirm that it is for volunteering and what you'll be doing? And it doesn't have to be a full day. It could be 2 half days or 4 quarter days if you wanted, however you wanted to do it. And I think it's recognising that in this always on world, we as an employer are going to be part of your life and your family's life, whether you've got fur babies or kids or extended family or wherever you are. And then it goes back again to having that adult conversation about accountability and responsibility. If there is an expectation and you have committed to carrying out or completing a task or a project, if you can't do it because other things are getting in the way, tell us, and we'll work, jointly, we'll work through it. If those things are because you're not putting in enough time and you've previously done it, then we need to kind of understand that a bit more. If it's because there's, grandparents are suddenly ill or, whatever it is, we will do that. But the counter to that is ensuring that level of accountability is there on all parties, and that's as much me as it is Steve, as it is everybody. So it should be life balance, because work needs to fit in it, because work has a very important part to play, not just remuneration, but in terms of progression, self-development, in terms of a purpose. I think that's why it's really important.
Like you say, it supports our life outside of work. You spend most of your time, whether it be physically in or working from home, you spend most of your time working, the weekend working.
Yeah. So, but it is part of life, isn't it? It's an intrinsic part.
It is,
As is going to the shops, as is watching Netflix, as is, these days, as is having a phone. And with the phone these days, and, I don't know about you, but I know we communicate on email and video conferencing, but depending on your phone is always on. So it can be an intrusive part of life. So let's make it about life balance, and let's make it around those core values, not just company values, but your own individual values. But it's about communication.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I've got a couple of questions before we finish up. So just this one's a one that I'm just going to chuck in there.
Oh, okay.
We talked a little bit about at the start. We were talking about if you don't ask, you don't get, and I think you mentioned you didn't have a mentor. And mentoring again has become quite kind of, I think probably over the last somewhere between 5 to 10 years has become much more of a thing. How do you think a mentor can help individuals, and have you had a mentor in the last sort of 3 to 5 years that has helped you, and what have you learned from that journey or experience?
So how do I think they can help? I think acting as a safe sounding board, I think is that kind of safe space to do that constructive self-challenge, constructive, self-criticism, if you like. What do you think? And I actually do quite a bit of informal coaching and mentoring of a few other people. All very ad hoc and all very informal. In terms, I think the other thing it does is, I think there's you mentoring people below, but I think there's also potentially mentoring people kind of above you in the traditional hierarchy. No matter how flat you structure, there's always going to be a hierarchy. And it's mentoring your peers and kind of above, in terms of around that, keeping focus on the core values. So your purpose, why do you exist? Why does the business exist? What did you come for in the first place? Going back to the life balance piece, you know. I think in terms of, I think modelling for, so I said I've got twin boys who are 18. They think nothing about a grey-haired old woman running a tech business. That's completely normal to them. That's a visibility piece in terms of mentoring. One of my sons wants to do computer science at university, and there's one girl in his class who's doing computer science, and she is also going to be doing it at university. Yeah, I think that's both really sad and really inspiring. I think it's really sad that in 2023, in a large, you know, mixed, good, comprehensive, there is still only one girl doing it in year 13. However, the fact she wants to do it at university, I think is absolutely fantastic. And as far as my sons are concerned and their peer group, that's completely normal because they've seen me in it. Now she's got a tech background. She will be significantly higher flying than all the rest of us because she's, you know, programming already. I think there's so I think there's a visibility piece, which is you're always mentoring to a certain extent, even if you don't know. So about it's behaving in the best way you can and how you would want others to behave with you and about you. I think that's a form of mentoring that I think is really pertinent, going back to that life balance piece. You know, don't do as I say, do as I do, ideally. It's hard, and you'll know as being a parent, it's difficult. Have I had a mentor? Not really, in terms of a formal piece, and that's something that, you know, that I've had a couple of really inspirational people that I've spoken to. So one of them is a lady called Sarah Brummett, and I did some kind of training with her about 10 years ago, and she talks about executive presence, but she was the person who really helped me realise in terms of consultative selling and this vocalisation, this real kind of acknowledgement of everything I'd known in export sales around the end user, the value, what's in it for them, but articulating that in the open questions. And then there's been a couple of other people, but I would say is I think currently, particularly in the West Yorkshire region, particularly in Leeds, and you know, we're, as I said, we're based in the mighty Halifax, you know, land of Happy Valley. I call it the mighty Fax. I think in this part of the world, there are a large number of really impressive, inspirational people. I mean, you know, like you and Becca, and there's Sandra Moore. There's loads of people in in the investment community, and men as well as women. I mean, there's lots of people that have kind of got this balance right, and appear to have, in my view, and appear to also have this mentality around, look, it's a part of what we do. So going back to that life balance piece, it's part of what we do, and about helping each other. So Paul Mann, who's at Squire Patton Boggs, has been amazingly generous with connections and contacts, and I've reciprocated. Hopefully, he's probably more value to me than mine are to him, you know. But it's that kind of, they're not mentors as such, but do unto others as you would be done unto. I think that's my grandma used to say. So it's that around just being aware, being considerate, and behaving how you would want others to behave with you, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's we've got a really great community in the north, and yeah, there's a lot of. I mean, I'm similar to yourself. I haven't really had a mentor. I've got a few people that I kind of speak to or go to for a bit of advice ad hoc here and there. But
yeah.
It's, you know, I think the main thing that I've and actually brings me nicely, put my teeth back in, nicely onto my final question, because I think one of the main things for me personally, and I'm not sure about for yourself, where I found that, you know, using someone as a sounding board or you know, just speaking to someone every now and then in my network on a peer level, is dealing with imposter syndrome. It's something that I've struggled with for years, and also as I've started to talk about it more openly over the last sort of 2 or 3 years, I've been surprised by how many more people do, and people that you just really wouldn't think have any, just don't have any symptoms. So I'd be really interested to find out what your thoughts are on this, and and how you've managed it if you do suffer.
Yeah.
Or any advice to those that do.
I think at heart, 99.9% of the population, or the working population, suffer from imposter syndrome, right? I think the ones that don't are the ones who lack emotional intelligence, potentially. And again, it goes back in a nice kind of full circle. So, Steve, who set the business, I should say as well, actually, that Steve and Ian Brown, who's our investor at Finance Yorkshire from Anticus, they're also kind of mentors in that, goes back into this imposter syndrome, in that, it's about checking in with them. And it's not, I think this whole thing around assumption and, assuming that we're failing or we're not doing as well as we can do. If you then ask for that feedback without fishing, it's about asking for that genuine feedback, that constructive feedback, but also, just kind of saying to people, look, I'm not sure here. I've got this or this. What do you think? So Pete Mills from CRISP is a great one at this. You say to him, Pete, I'm not really sure. I'm thinking this or this. And he turned around and said, well, you know what the answer is, Rach. You've already said it. I'm like, oh, yeah, right. OK.
Yeah.
So that imposter syndrome, I think we all kind of have it. But I think it's because the person who knows exactly what they're doing is potentially the person who's stopped being curious and has stopped learning. And is, we're talking about growing and, does anybody get it right 100% of the time? I'm yet to meet anybody, although don't tell my husband and sons, because I'm always right. And even when I'm wrong, I'm more right than they are. Yeah. Well, when I'm wrong, I'm more right than they are, And I think it is that around that, it's having humility, really. And that self-awareness to go, actually, I'm feeling like I'm winging it, because that's a huge thing. And kind of saying, clearly, what you don't want to be doing is in that really important meeting where you're about to land a sale, where you're about to sign a contract for investment, go, actually, you know what, I really don't know what I'm doing, right? That's not the time to admit to imposter syndrome. But I can guarantee that the person on the other side of the table or on the other side of the camera will also be thinking, oh, I think I've got this. Have I? I'm not really sure. And again, it's about building out those. I think if you understand what success means for that other person, right, by asking them, it goes back to what's in it for them, what does success look like for them, then you'll realise actually your own success, you've probably already got it, or you're probably on the way to it. So therefore, actually, yeah, you may be winging it for 10-20% of it, but the other 70-80% you've got nailed, and there's opportunity to grow. So I think another long-winded answer, but I think it's something that actually I think we've all got. If you haven't got it, I'd really question. And I think it's actually about using it then for the good, for the benefit, which is, so what can I do from this? How do I use this? You're running a hugely successful tech business and have been for 20 odd years. That's amazing, What do you have to have imposter syndrome about? From my point of view. And so it's about going, actually, I think it's taking that step, taking a step back and going, actually, where have we come from? What am I doing? Where am I going? Am I being true to my values? Am I being true to my goal, my purpose? What's in it for the other people? Am I, what have I agreed to? Going back to accountability, what have I agreed to? What have I agreed to deliver? Am I going to be doing that? Is my integrity intact? Okay, what can I learn? So it's sunflower syndrome. I think I quite like sunflower. I think that's more positive than imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
So,
I agree. It's definitely a more positive, nicer way of putting it, isn't it?
So,
fantastic. No, I really appreciate. I've really enjoyed the conversation today.
Likewise.
You have too. Thank you very much for your time today and for sharing all your valuable experience and learnings with us. And for being really authentic as well, being really kind of, I'm very much of the same kind of, on the same page and the same believer is just, what you see is what you get, and just being really open, honest and transparent. So I really appreciate that. If if any of our listeners wanted to get in touch with you, how's it best for them to reach out to you?
So I'm on email as Rachel at RACHEL at askuma.ai. I'm on LinkedIn. If you Google Rachel Swann, there'll be another one that appears, and she's the Chief Constable of Derbyshire. That's not me. So I'm the other one. I'm on LinkedIn. I quite often get people who viewed my profile on LinkedIn and they're all in the police forces. I'm like, no, I think you're disappointed by finding me. Oh, yeah. I said she's Chief Con of Derbyshire, So, yeah, LinkedIn or my mobile, I'm happy to give that out. If you want, that's 07793846363, whatever. Or just Google Ask Uma, ASKUMA. And that was a stroke of genius, actually, just to tell that final bit. Which was, as you said, I said, we're Uma. And when I joined the business, we were on page 6 or 7 of Google, right? But we have this amazing domain because initially, when we first started, part of it was around voice activation. So Ask Uma. So all I did was use the hashtag Ask Uma, and we're now on page 1 of Google. Somebody will Google us now, and we're not. But just by using that hashtag, it was brilliant. So yeah, just find us on the website. As you can tell, I'd love to talk to people. I like to ask questions. I'm really, really curious. So, but then I can talk as well.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to speaking to you again.
Likewise, Sandra. Thanks ever so much. I feel very flattered. Thank you.
Oh, good.
Thanks for listening to our latest Let's Talk Leadership, the Culture Edit Reloaded podcast. If you are a leader interested in being on the hot seat, contact me via LinkedIn. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Take care and see you all soon.